There is literally no one in the public sphere that you or I can trust. We have essentially legalized drug use and drug trafficking below a certain level. Look around. It is failing. It's an insanity that has captured my state.
So we're talking just about California.
California is where it's gone to the extremes. Addiction is a motivational disorder, right? All motivations shrink, one motivation emerges. Survival is not as important as do the drug. I was being fired because of this comment I made about Hillary Clinton, and they did come down to me like a ton of bricks.
Do you think you'd be able to do that sort of an analysis now on Trump, Kamala, and Biden?
You're going to get me in trouble, motherfucker. So, okay, let's do it. So, during COVID, I got canceled for trying to calm people down. I saw the panic. I thought it was the press. I didn't realize the government was involved with it. And I was like, don't listen to these people. They just want your eyeballs. The word staggering and grim was uttered every third sentence before we ever had a case here. I knew that 6 feet distancing was out of thin air. I knew that Dr. Redfield and Scott Atlas were sidelined for having an opinion based on data. The public mind is awakening. Somebody who got injured from the vaccine because they needed it to go to school needs to sue those fucking institutions.
Before you hear from Dr. Drew, I ask if you want to support the show, all you have to do is press subscribe. If you press subscribe, I can have more wonderful guests like Dr. Drew discussing the issues you want to hear about and that the mainstream media are not covering. But without further ado, Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew, thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule to come and speak with me.
That is very kind. I am a nutty cuckoo fan of yours, so Thank you for talking to me. I feel like I was telling the studio people that you elevate me. You make me think more clearly and more produce thoughts that makes me proud. Well, on my own, I tend to sink. So
I find that hard to believe, but I remember our fantastic conversation on populism.
Yes.
After the Nancy Pelosi debate earlier this year.
Yes.
I loved being on your show, and so it's great that now you've taken the time to come on now, just before the US election. So there's loads I want to talk to you about.
Yes.
I want to ask you about this recent report. The New York Post led with it.
Before you do it, we had another topic we said we were going to address, which is this idea of the democratization of media and how shitty information is combined with great information.
Let's start with that.
I just want to do one thing, which is that I just when you said that, I just put out on X somebody, and I would put out Jay Bhattacharya's analysis of the HHS article, which we're going to discuss.
Yes.
Okay, and Jay is doing God's work because I couldn't penetrate that article on my own. He lays it out, all the deficiencies and the illegalities and the excesses of our government, which are just mind-blowing. You asked why it was mind-blowing. I will tell you in the course of this conversation. But in the thread response to me putting that out, somebody said, well, then who shall we trust? Didn't use the Queen's English. Whom shall we trust? And I said, no one. No one. There is literally no one in the public sphere that you or I can trust. I kind of trust you. I think I can trust you. So we have to build one at a time. And I said there are simple things you look for.
Build individuals, you mean?
Individuals you can trust who are sort of, you should consider as sort of helping you consume things. The advise, analysis, like Jay Bhattacharya is my guy. I go to him to understand the world a little bit in the certain area. And we should have them, across the spectrum of different ideas. But you need honesty. You need forthrightness. You need clarity of thought, like you can follow what they're saying. And they need to be clear about when they are wrong and adjust course. Like Dr. Redfield sort of fits that for me a bit. I feel like he's making a real serious attempt to get it right.
I don't know who Dr. Redfield is.
Redfield was the head of the CDC during the pandemic. And he is one of the people that raised his hand and said, I don't know, 6 feet, where'd you get that? Why are we doing that? Where'd that come from? Do it. He was one of these people was saying, you're not doing an evidence-based approach to this pandemic. And he and Scott Atlas were two of the dissenting voices in the whole operation and were summarily dismissed and were replaced by people, as you will see in the HHS document, like Dr. Walensky, who was doing the bidding of the administration.
So you're not against elites necessarily.
I haven't said that yet.
Because Dr. Jay Bhattacharya,
Yeah.
friend of this, well, actually I haven't had him on this show, but I've
You should. You will love him.
previously at
You
The
will love him.
Spectator. I do love him.
He's the
Great
poster
man.
child for the excessive, poster child for whom we should turn to for honest, forthright analysis, and he's the poster child for the excesses of COVID. They chose to cancel and do a devastating takedown on that guy. He's one of the most
Exactly.
sincere, lovely, brilliant gentlemen you'll ever meet. That's the guy they went after. You should make note of that.
He's so kind and tender. It's
kind.
why it's so
Yes.
bizarre to see.
Not disgusting. It's
Yeah.
disgusting.
In fact, I mentioned him in my populism speech at the Oxford Union, but he is nonetheless an expert. So you're looking towards him because he's an expert, and so you're not necessarily against the expert. It's just they've got to earn and maintain your
Correct.
trust.
I feel like this is the confusing and hard part. I am concerned with an ensconced elite, which is the ossification of the dynamism of our system, and it is the enemy right now. You and I might be part of it, and we have to watch out not to be. You understand what I'm saying? That we have had the good fortune of living in the public eye for a while. That's part of being some of the elite. And the elite is buttressed right now by a bureaucracy that is, again, ossified, and I would argue sick.
So I want to ask you to be more specific, because everyone has a different conception of who the elite are.
Yes.
And so when you say there's an elite, are you referring specifically to the field of medicine, or are we zooming out a little bit? We're talking about the American political elite. Who are the elite for you who are failing?
Well, certainly the academic elite and the political elite. One of the astonishing things about the COVID, I was telling you before the break, really did us a favor. It showed us what was happening. It tore open the Band-Aid, tore open the wound, and showed us the excesses, and now we have the HHS document that documents specifically the excesses. So it's no longer in question. There they are. But I think at its core, what you were asking why this was so astonishing for me as an American, and you're fascinated by our system, it seems like, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very different than yours. When did you become fascinated with it?
Since watching Forrest Gump as a boy, I think maybe it started
By
with
America
the culture.
or the American culture or
It started with the culture before.
Okay. So to me, what Forrest Gump showed, amongst many things, was the different cultures within the United States, right?
Yeah.
We are becoming almost 50 countries within this union.
Yeah.
And that is the genius of the Founding Father system. It was 13 countries that came together in a federal system. The problem is this federal system is run completely amok. And it was never supposed to be in our lives. It's up my ass all the time. And that is an adulteration of the intent of this system. The only reason it hasn't gone fully totalitarian is because of the states. The states are and the culture of the states, which are, you see how different we are. Each state is, people that come here from Europe just go, what? How do you Louisiana versus Nevada? How does that work?
Yeah.
How do you all live together? Well, it's the genius of a more perfect union, which was the Constitution. I think my suspicion is somewhere along the way, probably in the 60s, a group started looking to the federal government to protect civil liberties, which was part of the Bill of Rights and part of what we were doing and part of the Supreme Court's analysis of what's going on. But that positive impulse became excessive, where the federal government is using every excuse and every mechanism at hand, bureaucratically and otherwise, legal system, DOJ, Internal Revenue Service, to push a civil rights agenda. Where I became aware of this, where it sort of opened my eyes, and I'm an Obama voter. I'm long for the days of Bill Clinton. That's sort of my political bent. And when his Secretary of Education was on Chelsea Handler's talk show on Netflix. She said, I'm not educated. I don't know anything about education. I thought I'll bring in the Secretary of Education, find out what should education be and what is his job. So he sits this young man down and she goes, what is your job as Secretary of Education? What are you supposed to do? And he goes, what's my job? Oh, well, my job is to protect the civil liberties of every student in the country. And I thought, it took my breath away. I went, oh my God. That is cabinet level official. That is the totality of his job in his description. Yeah. We are in big trouble.
Yeah. So it's not actually about making sure that the people...
Nothing to do with education.
...actually learn about...
Nothing to do with education.
So everything's immediately framed in the civil rights...
Civil liberties. Civil liberties. That's exactly... And then I started looking at things through that frame, and there it is. You sort of see it. And that's where the excesses come in, and that's why people are angry. They don't know why they're angry, but I'm telling you, that's what did it. Because within that context, people are told they're bad. People can't get their kids educated. They can't get the things they want and need because those aren't important.
Okay.
And at the same time, this federalist system that we debated, read the Federalist Papers, everybody, please, whether we should even have a federal system, right? It really was for defense and interstate commerce, and that's about it. Yeah. That's what we agreed to, and some rights to protect some rights in the Constitution, and have a court system that then defended those rights. But this has gone completely out of hand, and the fact that I have to worry about the federal government every day of my life, or think about the federal government, or that I'm exercised about what's going on at the DOJ, this is insane to me.
But the Federalist dream still survives in that for example, we're in California now, and the people are leaving. People are moving to Texas, moving to Florida.
So to your point, and I maybe I didn't make this point strong enough, we are 50 countries, and that is the genius and strength. This was Jefferson's point of view, that was really what was our strength was. And I believe that now. The problem is, I'm going to pull from my friend Adam Carolla. He keeps saying, and reasonably so, I'm watching it happen now. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about 2 years ago. Now I'm seeing it. He said, the states are going to start to, and Michael Malice, too, who you ought to interview.
I am interviewing him in Austin,
good. Yeah. Malice will tell you the same thing. He thinks there's already been a complete dissolution of the state union. Yeah. He thinks we are at 50 states. But Adam says this one thing, which I think is a little more clear, which is there are going to be safe spaces and octagons, and that's it. And so you're now in a safe space state. I kind of prefer Nevada, Tennessee, Florida, and those are octagons. So and when the economic consequence of that comes to bear, that's when there's going to be trouble, because the octagons are going to flourish, and the safe spaces. Look at California. Look around. It is failing. And it's going to fail, and then start looking around for money from the thriving states, then we got a problem.
Okay, so how does that problem play out?
I don't know. I don't get it. I'm not a good future forecaster. I kind of see where it's going. I don't know how it plays
Because
out.
It might not be a problem at all. It might be the case that people see the success of these other states. They move wherever it's better to live, so long as they can afford to.
Yes.
And then, or they demand for the changes that they see happening in other states.
Correct. That's the best possible outcome, is that we actually change directions here. But the uncanny part of living in this state is we just don't seem to ever change direction, ever. And it's just an ensconced elite that does not get out of the way.
So you're not a fan of Gavin Newsom then. But let's come back to him a little bit later. What you're laying out seems to me like a libertarian, a sort of conservative
I am a little libertarian. I always thought I was libertarian until I met libertarians, and I thought, I have a heart. It's different. You have to really be ready to rip and shred if you're a really libertarian. No. I want a friend of mine, Leo Terrell. Yeah, I'm more of a classical liberal. Yeah. Leo Terrell. I was complaining about what I thought should be done for the homelessness situation here, which I know how to solve. It would not be. It would be so easy, and Leo goes, who's going to solve that? And I go, well, we got the county and the state. You go, the government? The government's going to solve it? Mr. Libertarian? I thought, yeah, okay.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that.
How to solve the homeless problem?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so easy.
Go on, tell me.
Oh, my God. Okay. One of tiny little pieces on the ballot right now, we'll see if it goes through, which is reversing this law which allows people with various forms of addiction to go in and support their habit by stealing $950 a day. Do you know you're allowed to steal in this state, and it's just a ticket. And of course, you're a drug addict living in the streets, you can't be tracked. They just tear those tickets up. Okay, so we have a law where you're not allowed to interfere with somebody as long as they're stealing under $900. They can come in every day and steal from your store.
And when was that brought in, that law?
It was a Prop 48, I think, Prop 57. These two, AB 109. These were ones were legislative, and a couple were propositions. We have this system in California of direct democracy, which is something that scared the founding fathers to death, and we are living proof of why that was so scary. We are tricked into endorsing propositions that end up in horrible places, look great on paper and turned out to have horrible consequences. And so that's one piece. So you can steal to support your habit. We have essentially legalized drug use and drug trafficking below a certain level. Okay, you can, again, it's a citation, so the cops don't even bother. They know not to bother. So you can use until you die, and no matter how sick you get from your mental illness or drug addiction, people like me are not permitted to do anything to help you. Mm-hmm. Do you see where the lack of permission also was these were all well-meaning ideas, started with the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act in this state, where people were going from being sort of willy-nilly committed, which I think may even still go on in England, for psychiatric problems, to you can only hold people for three days against their will.
Is that anything to do with Reagan? Because didn't Reagan get rid of the clinics and the...
Incorrect. Yes, the clinics. Right. So this is the other piece of the problem. So the history of... Our Constitution does not, this is back to the federalist sort of intent not being in our lives. The Constitution specifically does not provide for the federal government taking care of mental health, okay? It started all the way back to, what was the first president? It'll occur to me in a second, like the 7th president or something, first took a look at this and said, this is not in the Constitution. The states must have their own mental health system and care for the people that need custodial care or acute psychiatric illness or chronic psychiatric care. So we developed the state mental health system, the so-called state hospitals. Now, some of them were great and worked for 150 years. Some of them deteriorated and were rather draconian and were sort of not working. The National Institute of Mental Health, okay, was developed by one guy who felt we had to have a system that oversaw essentially the mental health care and research in this country. It was started, I forget the name of it to begin with, but this guy...
and when is this?
This is the early 60s, actually late 50s.
Okay.
Finds a suitable advocate in a young senator from Massachusetts whose sister had serious mental illness and was mistreated by the system. She had a frontal lobotomy at the behest of her father, and the excesses of lobotomy at the time rivaled the opioid epidemic that we know more recently went through, which is another topic we can get into. Mm-hmm. But it was insane. These assholes were doing neurosurgery at the bedside. It was disgusting. It started from Spain, came over here, and then we, of course, went crazy with it. He really had mental health as a top-of-mind issue. He himself suffered from opiate addiction and eventually stimulant addiction, well documented, not often talked about. That young man was John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. His last signature was put to the Community Mental Health Act before he went to Dallas on his fateful trip. Mm. And that document was spearheaded by this, who now became head of the National Institute of Mental Health. I'm blanking on his name. Dr. Felix, I think it was. He and the two subsequent NIMH directors one was an entomologist, one was a pediatrician. They were not trained in modern psychiatry. They were psychoanalysts, and they believed in the Foucault fashion. I hope this is not too much. That mental illness is caused by institutions, not by a biological process. Only one of them had ever set foot in a state hospital, and they determined that this legislature should dismantle the state hospital system in the deference to community mental health center. You said the clinics, you were right. They were community mental health centers whose design, much like the Secretary of Education, was supposed to protect civil liberties. The design of these community mental health systems were to prevent, not treat, prevent mental illness, which, of course, no one can do. No, I mean, not in a really systematic way like that.
Okay, so that was a mistake.
It looked good on paper. It turned out to be a mistake. All the community health care clinics failed miserably, and all the patients from the state hospitals were belched out with no plan for what to do with any of them.
And sorry, this happened under Reagan then?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
We're
Okay,
still
sorry.
under
Forgive
we're
me.
still under Kennedy and Johnson and Carter.
Okay.
And what happened next is they all poured into the nursing homes, the streets, and the prisons. And a lot of them ended in the prisons. They did not belong in any of these places, but that's where they've ended up, and that's where they have stayed. And Reagan came in and looked around and said, this is a waste of money. We're not doing anything with these community mental health centers. Let's give money to the states and tell them to reestablish their state healthcare system, which they did not.
Oh, okay. Okay, I've got that story all wrong.
The myth is that Reagan dismantled the state hospitals. He did not. Kennedy set them on the course of extinction. And Reagan put the final nail in what was supposed to be the replacement for the state healthcare system. It's always more complicated than the myth suggests, right?
Okay. So back to your solution then.
My solution goes: no more stealing, no more using, and if you're caught using, we take care of you. We build residential people. The other part of the problem is this country still believes that psychiatric care is somehow similar to what they saw in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Those words will come out of people's mouths all the time. Yeah. That was a novel by Ken Kesey, fictitious, with a movie that followed about a state healthcare system 75 years ago. It is not like that any longer at all. The psychiatric healthcare is rather lovely, and I wouldn't mind. That's why I like working it. It was outdoor. We just do it completely differently, and it takes time. It takes years to get somebody rehabilitated from the state in which we have allowed them to deteriorate. And we need to put that system in place. I know exactly how to do it. I've done it. I ran systems like that for years. It's easy. It's not hard. It's not even like building a cancer center. It is really pretty easy. You know how to staff it. You know who we need. It's not that hard. But you have to say...
It's quite hard to... Sorry, go on.
We have to say, like they did in Amsterdam, you can't do this anymore. You have to come with me. Please come with me. We got help for you. And when people's brains aren't working right, they don't see what's happening to them. It's actually a biological term called anosognosia. They get to a point, both from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and addiction, they lose insight and they can't see what's happening. And if that lack of insights happens from stroke or dementia, and I don't treat the patient, I'm guilty of patient abuse. But if that same symptom complex develops from addiction, bipolar, or schizophrenia, and I do anything to a patient, I've committed a crime. That's insane. And then we need to adjust we need to reinstitute fundamentally gravely disabled. We used to say somebody's gravely disabled. They not just can't couch surf anymore, they decide they have to lie down on the sidewalk. That is gravely disabled. They are disabled at that point, and we need to help them. But again, if it was from dementia, we don't help them, against the law. If it's from schizophrenia, we try to help them, again, against the law. It's insane. It's an insanity that has captured my state.
So we're talking just about California.
California is where it's gone to the extremes.
Are there other states that are doing it
Similar. But all the drug addicts come here because they know they can do their thing. These are my patients. I ran a drug unit for 25 years. I know this disease well. I know how it works. The
disease of addiction.
Addiction, yeah. And it's just heartbreaking to me. And by the way, particularly the schizophrenics and the bipolar disorder, they're out on the streets, or the meth addicts, which are plentiful, literally tens of thousands. Most of them have families and resources and doctors ready to go. And families go up to Sacramento and beg for help. And they're told to, what would the British term be? Give me a good one.
Do one.
We call it scram.
Scram, yeah.
So, and this it's it's heartbreaking. It's disgusting. And now there are NGOs and all sorts of systems in place to protect it. I've got a kid that wrote a book, a guy named Klickstein. Book is called Crooked Smile, and I was interviewing him, and he said, he's just off the streets like 4 years. And he said, when I was out there the last few years, every person I encountered from a helping system who was giving me my drugs, giving me my needles, giving me food so I could live in my tent, every single one of them patted me on the back and said, "You're a victim of capitalism. Once we get communism in there, this will all stop. Don't worry."
Have you read Michael Schellenberger's San Francisco? Because his thesis seems pretty close to you, although specifically on those on the streets, let's say in San Francisco, they're basically two categories of people on the street. One is they have mental health issues, and the other is that they are addicts, and that a lot of the time they're not people who aren't they're people who come from means. They're not actually poor people. So
like I told you, they have resources available. You're not allowed to deploy them.
It's a progressive fallacy to think that these are.
It's always been that. One of the reasons I disdain Governor Newsom is he perpetrated this myth that the face of homelessness is a mother of two who just lost her job. I dare you to find that person. I dare you. Does not exist unless she's on meth. Then it exists. And you can't go out on the streets and say, "Are you an addict?" and then collect that data. Have a high school student fill out a questionnaire. You have to know how to interview people with psychiatric illness to get the facts. You have to have a lot of experience to get that. And I have walked the streets of Skid Row with Michael Schellenberger. I like to think that I helped shape his ideas about things. Yeah. And we saw it. We walked it. And I went back in. We were at the Union Rescue Mission, and I was talking to some of the staff, and I thought, I heard all the stories about what they were doing and treating and how they had treated. I went, oh my God, it's all addiction. I said, when was the last time you saw somebody come in a Union Rescue Mission that wasn't an addict? And they were like, maybe a schizophrenic once in a while, but they don't really come in.
Predominantly addiction rather than mental health issues. So is there a connection? Is that by the time of Reagan, going back in history, and the ending of the system that you've described, do we then see a rise in homelessness? Do we see a correlation there? Or your thesis that it's mainly, it's not mental health, it's mainly addiction, would suggest that actually there hasn't been there wasn't a large growth then.
Correct. The growth happened as addiction started being enhanced by law. And certain states became attractive to addicts because they could do and get and keep you use. When the people don't understand this, addiction is a motivational disorder, right? All motivations shrink, one motivation emerges. Survival is not as important as do the drug. Let me give you an example. What one of my patients said once, I thought was really kind of a clear sense of this. He was a young man, he was a heroin addict or poly drug, whatever. And he had a pistol in his mouth, was going to kill himself because he was so desperate. His disease had run out of control. He wanted to get sober, but he just didn't have hope he could. So he was going to kill himself, and he thought to himself, oh, I can't do this to my drugs. I love them too much. I can't kill myself because of my love for the drugs.
Oh, so sad.
But that to me was this love for the drug and this motivation for the drug takes everything. That's why people die of it. They die repeatedly, and they still keep going because survival is not as important as it's a usurpation of the survival system. So,
just forgive me for being personal, but how did you become focused on addiction specifically?
Accident. I was always interested. So I'm an internist by training. I was doing critical care and all. I was going to be a cardiologist, and I started moonlighting at a psychiatric hospital. I ended up getting very involved in the medical care of psychiatric patients. I was in college. I was very interested in the brain. I've always been interested in neurophysiology and brain stuff and psychology. And so this was like a natural for me. When I was there and on call and working ridiculous hours, I would always seek refuge on the drug unit because the psychiatric wards are different than chemical dependency wards. I like the patients. I like the culture. I like the staff. It was just a much more fun place to be. And I got very good at detoxing patients because at that point there was no training on detox, and yet we were all in training, seeing all these patients. There was no systematic training on how to do it. I got very good at it, so I was asked to see a lot more drug addicts to get them off the drugs.
What was good about your technique? What were you doing that was?
We systematized it. We were using what was at the time called the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Had some suggestions, and we were, for instance, don't use Haldol in alcohol withdrawal. It makes them seize, and it does not ameliorate the withdrawal at all. Intermediate acting benzodiazepines in high doses until the withdrawal stops. No one ever told me that. It's a very simple.
Don't take benzos, you mean?
No. Give high-dose benzos until the withdrawal. Oh, alcohol withdrawal is a potential fatal process. People lose track of this. DTs are commonly fatal. And so you have to be very aggressive, but you have to be very specific in what you do. There are other ways of doing it, of course. But the point is, I got very good at the nuance because a lot of these people are not just on alcohol. They were also on Xanax, and they were also on heroin, whatever. So I had protocols for each of these things, okay? And we developed them over time. We got very good at it. It's one of the reasons I was skeptical about Suboxone because these words never came out of my mouth. How am I going to get these patients off heroin? I could never do it. They never get off. No problem. 3 days off. We took care of it. We got very good at doing that. Why am I into all this? Oh, how did I get into this? So because I was down there all the time on the drug unit, the director asked me to be the assistant director to cover him on holidays and things like that. He said, don't worry about it. No big deal. It's only a few works a year. Then he quit. Now the assistant director was the director, and I had to really pay attention and get my training up to speed, and was inspired by the fact that to do that job well, you had to know everything. You had to know the medical, the neurobiological, the psychiatric, the psychological, the family systems. I mean, everything. And it was a challenge. It was great, and I loved it. And it also showed me how the brain worked when it's under the influence of a broken motivation. You get to see all the brain systems operating with a skewed motivation. It's really fascinating.
Forgive me for asking what might be a very simple question.
Yeah.
But this is a topic addiction
Please.
is not, well, actually, I'm 6 years sober, so I've had my own problems with it, but it's not a topic I know particularly well. One thing I often hear is people having an addictive personality. Is there such thing as an addictive personality?
Let's define what addiction is, right? I have a broad definition, which is a biological disorder with a genetic basis, where the hallmark is progressive use and preoccupation in the face of consequence, work or school, finance, health, legal, or relationships, and yet you progress. And grandpa had a problem. That pretty much cinches it for me.
So it's a combination.
And then denial. So it's genes, environment, like something's got to kind of trigger. You have to have access to the drugs, So gene, environment, progression in the face of consequence, and progression is the piece, by the way, the piece that California has left out of their consideration. We'll just give them the heroin. It still progresses. It's a progressive illness in all settings. And then denial. Denial is the all.
Do we all have the genes for it?
No. Oh, no.
So
there's personality stuff. So people sort of in the rooms, in the recovering community, go, we have some unique personalities here, and blah blah blah. That we kind of see commonalities. And I'm a thrill seeker, and I'm I kind of go towards extreme things, and I like sports that are kind of dangerous. That's addicts. And there's various reasons for that. But a guy named Mark, my favorite version of this question and the way I answer it is a little bit old now, a little bit outdated, as is a lot of my stuff. This is like the old man doctors talking about back in the day. A guy named Mark Schuckett down at UC San Diego did some studies. He had a cohort of essentially 200 sons of alcoholic fathers, and he wanted to know what features predicted developing the disease. Okay? And so we looked at everything. Is it, anxiety? Is it frustration intolerance? Is it ADD? He could not find one thing that they all had that predicted progression to disease. Okay? The one thing he came up with was resistance to alcohol intoxication. If you were somebody that could drink your buddies under the table, so to speak, and your dad was an alcoholic, that predicted progression. Okay? Doesn't mean that you had to have that for progression, but it predicted progression. So there may be some other variants underneath this.
Paradoxical. If you have a resistance to it,
correct,
you have a tendency towards addiction.
But you have to use a lot more in order to get what you need.
Okay.
Yeah, you tend to, you can't stop, keep going. You don't have the consequences necessarily because you don't get intoxicated as easily. You have to drink a lot, and then you do get the consequences. But so there was that. And so then he went and he said, well, I wonder if there are any animal systems that we could study this in. Lo and behold, all mammals, all animals have it. He was able to take it all the way down to the fruit fly. Fruit flies have it. And he developed a chamber.
Sorry, just with alcohol?
Just with alcohol.
Okay, this is only test on alcohol.
Only test on alcohol, but for me, alcohol and addiction is all the same thing. They're rare that you meet addicts that don't have alcoholism in their family history. Just they find a drug of choice that takes over. for various reasons. That's a complicated issue too.
Okay.
You really want to get into this?
No,
We're getting into the weeds.
Yeah,
All
please,
right.
let's get in the weeds.
So he developed this chamber called he called it the inebriameter, where these fruit flies were in with alcohol vapors. Okay. And lo and behold, the fruit flies were flying around, he'd send in the alcohol vapors. A whole bunch dropped out initially. Turned out that group had a specific gene. He named that gene cheap date. And so, and then lo and behold, as time went on, yes, there were some fruit flies that just kept flying around with all the rest of them dropped out, and this one group kept flying. So he took them out, studied the genes, and they had two genes: a single amino acid substitution of the GABA A receptor, and GABA is the anxiety system. It's the place where Valium binds. We know GABA is involved in alcoholism. So a proline serine substitution of the GABA A receptor conferred like a 60%. I'm not super clear on these numbers, but like a 60% probability of developing alcoholism. He also found an LL allele of the serotonin transporter, which is just a certain serotonin transporter system that's associated with depression and other things. He went back and looked at the young men, and yep, lo and behold, the gene is all over the place there. The probability of alcoholism with either of these genes was around 60 to 80%. But if you had both genes, it was 100%. 100%. Independent of the environment which you're raised.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
So back to your story then. You've kind of given half the story, but take me from there to being outspoken. Well, then you're in mainstream media and television.
I was doing radio in the early 80s, really motivated because of HIV and AIDS. Because, oh man, do you want all this story? I feel awkward talking about myself so much. I want to hear your thoughts. But okay, I'll keep going.
You're far more interesting than me.
Oh, please, not even. So in the 80s, a radio station here in Los Angeles became popular overnight, and it happened to be like across the street from my apartment. And so people were starting to socialize with that group, and somebody said, hey, they had this late night show where they needed help with community service. Somebody said, hey, Pinsky's in medical school. Maybe you can help make it a community service show. I was a fourth-year medical student. I think I was just finishing my third year. And I went up there, and I was like, oh, my God. This is where young people are coming for their health information. They had nowhere else to go. Venereal diseases, so-called at the time, STDs, were shrouded in secrecy. They didn't understand anything. Contraceptive was not something discussed with young adults. And none of them heard anything of this thing that we had just stopped calling grids and were recently calling AIDS. And I thought, shit, we have just been through the so-called sexual revolution, and no one knows what young people are doing. Condoms were still behind the counter. You had to ask the pharmacist to bring the condoms forward to get the condoms. And I thought, I'm 24 years old. I know what 18-year-olds are up to. The country doesn't seem to understand what is going on here and what they need. I'm just going to, I would design something that I would have wanted when I was 18. I'm just going to answer these questions for these kids. And I did it for 10 years for free, thinking I was doing community service, frankly. And it was considered...
You're doing these questions live on the radio?
Live on the radio, middle of the night. It was considered blasphemous. There's something wrong with you. You're talking to 19-year-olds about sex. What is wrong with you? It became popular so quickly that a newspaper article got written, and my residency director came down on me like a ton of bricks. You're sick. There's something wrong with you. Look what you're talking about. And I thought, God, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe my judgment is off. That's the day I learned, don't second guess the judgment of young people. They see things differently than you do. And I had to stop for a while. And then within 6 months, the mandate arrived. Doctors must begin talking about HIV and AIDS. And so I went back.
Wow. So that's actually a very early case of what I would describe as cancel culture.
But it was done by my residency program.
And what's interesting, and maybe this makes, probably because you're an agreeable person, but your response to it is like, yeah, maybe there is something wrong with me.
Oh yeah, I hate conflict. I don't like all this. I'm getting used to it, but I get attacked and it really troubles me. I have low self-esteem by nature, and so it kind of tickles all that.
Dr. Drew.
Oh yeah. So I've always liked my low self-esteem because it makes me take responsibility for everything, double check myself, and and made me a workaholic.
And maybe also being a doctor, you have to check everything.
Yeah,
right?
well, it enhanced my practice. Yes,
Right,
I could
okay.
use it to my benefit. It doesn't bother me that I have low self-esteem. It's just, esteem is a funny thing. It gets set about age 5, and you either have high or low, and I'll take low. I'll take it.
So then you take me from there to CNN.
How long is this show?
Well,
So the whole thing has been an exploration. I didn't understand media. I just knew radio had huge impact on young people, and I was now a healthcare provider, and it seemed to have a very negative impact. I wanted to see if I could turn it positive, like have a net benefit impact. The show became popular overnight. It got to the point where 1 in every 3 radios in Los Angeles was tuned to this show on Sunday night. So the powers that be decided to put it on 5 nights a week. This is an abridged version of the story. That was shocking to me because I was out in practice at that point. I was getting up at 5 in the morning, struggling to get home at 10 at night. I was a severe workaholic. I would go to do ICU rounds. I'd do hospital rounds. I'd see outpatient medical patients. Then I would go to the psychiatric hospital and run that entire operation. So I was nuts. And all of a sudden, I was going to do a radio show at 10 o'clock at night. Like, oh, crap, how am I going to do this? And that week, my wife got pregnant with triplets.
Triplets, wow.
Yes. And so she said, no more community service. You're going to get paid if you're going out every night. So I went in hat in hand, and the first deal was $50 a show, and I was getting paid.
Yeah.
And then finally, I was a radio employee. I was given a contract and stuff eventually, and that 5 nights a week. Long story, but it got syndicated, and then some television producers showed up and said, "I want to put this on TV." And I was like, "I don't know how to do it. What is it? How does that work?" Okay, let's explore it. See if I can do something good with that. And long story there, Adam Carolla ends up being the co-host with that, if you know him, and that then led to him coming into the radio program. The radio program then syndicated everywhere, and the MTV show. Actually, the show originally started on Fox, but Fox canceled it, got picked up by MTV, ends up on MTV Late Night. And now we're doing radio every night and MTV every night, so we're all over the place. That ends, radio keeps going. At the end, TV producers show up. There's no blueprints for anything I'm doing, ever, even at this present moment. I just love exploring all this. And just understand that my perspective has always been, use media to do good, to make a good difference, to make it. I may have to do things that it's not clear what I'm doing to get there, but I try to get there. And my sort of brand has been putting myself in environments where I don't belong. I did not belong in a rock radio station. I didn't belong there, but that's where the people were that I wanted to help. And so that's sort of been my sort of MO all along. Like, I'm willing to go places that maybe I shouldn't go because I think that's like Teen Mom was. I don't know if you've seen that show. I was on that for 13 years on MTV.
Oh, okay.
And that was, again, like, what are you doing? Like, because that's going to have an impact. I know it. I know it is. My instincts on how media affects particularly young people's behavior is pretty keen. So where am I now? So I'm doing radio. I still don't really understand television. And again, television producers show up. At the time, the topic of addiction was getting into the public discourse, and I was running a big addiction program at the time. And so I was being asked to commentate a lot at CNN, at Fox News. Back in the day, you could go on all the news outlets. Now, if you go on Fox News, you're not allowed to go on CNN, which is so crazy. I noticed Kevin O'Leary was on CNN and Fox this week, and I thought, good for everybody. It's a good sign.
Right.
Good for Kevin that he could do it. Good for CNN for letting somebody be on Fox and then come on over. Television producer showed up and said, we want to do this thing called Celebrity Rehab, where we're going to see you treat people in celebrity. I had treated a number of celebrities at the time. I didn't specialize in that. I didn't like it, but I was willing to do it. And we were very circumspect, and people still don't know who I treated, not on TV. And I said, well, that'd be great because I really want to increase awareness about this thing, but there's no way. No way. This is not possible. And we sort of solve one problem after another and figure out a way to bring my addiction team up to a residential program and do this thing where we treated people with addiction who also happen to be celebrities. And it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah.
I'm still It was a great experience, frankly.
So I want to know how. There's so many things we could talk about in your life, but I really
and
keep
event a CNN and whatever came on the heels of that.
right.
That's what.
I want to know then how it is that you told me before we started shooting that your main numbers now are on Rumble. So you're crushing it on alternative media. Yet you came from a mainstream media background.
Correct.
Is that because you've continued in your MO of just getting to the people? It's
Making
just
a difference.
making a difference.
That's basically what it is.
At what point did you give up? Have you given up on the mainstream media, or was there a point where you were like, actually, this is no good, it's failing? Because that would be a common, in the circles that we swim in, that is a common feeling that the mainstream media has failed.
So the way my run on mainstream, let me just say, so I don't forget to say it, I'm not interested in mainstream media so much anymore. I like doing Greg Gutfeld's show. I think that's a great show. I think they deliver information in a consumable way, funny, lively. We need to take ourselves less seriously, so I want to support that. So I do that show regularly. But in terms of mainstream media generally, I'm not interested. I'm just not interested. And let me just talk about how my mainstream media kind of, at least my era on what would be called mainstream media ended. I was on HLN for 8 years, I think. And we had good success, good run. I was on CNN almost every night. I was on Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper most nights. I would go in there and commentate on stuff. They decided to end my HLN show just because they were getting rid of all the talent on HLN. If you look at HLN now, it's all essentially forensic files. They got rid of all the broadcasting, and fine. But they were wonderful at CNN to me. They never told me what to say. The administration was bright and responsive and trying to do their best job and very concerned about the employees. And because of that concern, they were just telling me that in 3 months for various employees, sort of to help them with their health insurance and things like that, that we'd actually be stopping in 3 months, my show. And that they were ramping down everything. I was, okay, thank you. In that 3 months intervening, I was still doing a daytime radio show, and my program director saw me on Don Lemon, where I was talking about personalities of presidents and does Trump fit that, and what about, and what's like, because they were trying to understand Trump, and I was trying to understand him too. And my main message was, I'm sure he's hypomanic and he's kind of narcissistic, but we have lots of those in the background, and we have lots of psychopathology in the White House in people whom I admire greatly. Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite presidents had real serious mood disorders and all kinds of stuff. Abraham Lincoln was profoundly depressed, and I've got some news on him if you wish that no one knows. Well, remind me where
Abraham
I am.
Lincoln, yeah.
A book called The Lincoln Marriage. I interviewed that author, and in the book he chronicles a communication between Abraham Lincoln and a physician in Springfield, Illinois. One of the mysteries is why Lincoln called off his engagement to marry Todd Lincoln all of a sudden. He just all one day was like, I'm out. It appears that he went down and visited a prostitute by the river and came out Abraham is a naughty boy. And a young male. What are you going to say? And came out obsessed that he had syphilis. And he went to visit a physician. And I think that obsession caused him to pull out from Mary Lincoln. And he went to a physician in Springfield who said, you don't have it. I'll treat you with some mercury just in case, just to make you feel better. Therefore, you won't be able to transmit it, he was telling him. He gets back engaged to Mary Todd Lincoln. He continues a communication with this physician through the first 2 or 3 years of his presidency, while they kept him on mercury, for which the leading side effect is severe depression. And Lincoln was already known for suicidal depressions, severe, where they would have to go on watch with him, keep sharp objects away from him. Wow. And he had sort of fugue states and things. And I mean, it was nutty, cuckoo mood problems.
Wow.
My very favorite president.
That's amazing.
And
so back to your story, though.
How did I get to there? So I was talking about that on Don Lemon. And I was saying, be careful about who you judge to be president, because mental health shouldn't be the criteria necessarily. I mean, you don't want somebody crazy.
And this is when they're saying Trump's a psychopath.
They were saying he's a severe narcissist and all this kind of stuff. And remember, JFK was strung out on opiates and has a well-documented case of amphetamine-induced psychosis, where he threw off his clothes and did cartwheels down a hotel hallway. It's well documented.
Really? Not as president.
as president.
Really?
As president. Not his fault. A doctor did that to him, strung him out on amphetamine to deal with the downregulation of the opiates that the same guy was giving him. People don't understand one of the most hallmark symptoms of chronic opiate use is back pain. And people on chronic opiates look like they have testosterone deficiency and adrenal insufficiency. And so all this bit of him having Addison's disease, bullshit, is all opiate induced. And then this doctor, finally a really well-meaning psychiatrist, a female, came in and went, you cannot see this guy anymore. She knew what she was doing, straightened him out.
So how long was he on opiates?
A long time. It's hard to tell.
Wow.
I mean, all that back pain stuff, that was all opiate stuff. And he had trouble, if you read, this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but if you read some of the documentation of the tapes of him with Marilyn Monroe and stuff, he's having trouble climaxing and things. That's all opiates. So
perhaps this is, we'll come to RFK Jr. later, but perhaps this is where his passion comes from for trying to make America healthy again. It's what runs in his family.
The Kennedy family
who have come, this is the theme of the conversation, essentially.
Correct. The Kennedy family that's in recovery has a deep commitment to addiction and mental health. I'm blanking on, he was such a wonderful guy. He died recently. He was a major advocate before RFK stepped in. It's going to come to me in a minute. Peter Lawford, Kennedy Lawford. I forget his first name. He died, unfortunately, but he was the leading voice in the Kennedy family. And he would say to me, he'd go, Drew, my entire family is loaded with addiction and mental health problems. And remember, started with lobotomy with Rosemary. And Rose, the mom, is on the record supposedly as having said Rosemary's lobotomy was more traumatic for her than the assassinations. There was a more serious problem, more serious.
I would actually.
You can understand that. Yeah, I can too.
Yeah.
So CNN.
Yeah.
I'm on Don Lemon talking about presidential mental health, and the next morning I come in and my radio general manager goes, "That was great. Would you do 30 seconds on that for our website?" I went, "I think I could do that." Did 30 seconds. I'm getting up and he goes, "We have to give both sides. Do you have anything to say about Hillary?" And I went, "Funny thing, yesterday her doctors released her medical records." And I was like, they were astonishing to me. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I have issue with some of the ways they're treating her. So I went in sort of like almost like an interrogatory. I said, why are they doing this? Why aren't they working out for hypercoagulation? Why the armored thyroid? Why the obscuring? She had a brainstem stroke as part of a transverse sinus thrombosis. Why don't we all know about that? And why are you treating her with Coumadin and not Eliquis? And so I just did that. Okay. Didn't think anything of it. It feel like I was discussing about her doctor's care, not her.
In the run-up to 2016 election.
Correct. And the next morning, the Drudge Report puts on the front page, finally a physician has the what was it, some word they used, was forthright enough to say that she's not suitable for office, which I did not say. Nothing like that did I say. I was taking issue with her health care. I was worried about her because I know special people get treated special and it ends up shitty. Yeah. Special people get terrible health care. And I could smell it. I could see that's what was going on. Her doctors eventually responded to every one of my things and did the right thing with her. But my show was slated to end 2 weeks later, to be announced to end 2 weeks later. And so it looked like I was being fired because of this comment I made about Hillary Clinton. And they did come down to me like a ton of bricks. They came down to it. It was the first time they were like, shut up, don't say another word. And when the world seemed to think that I was fired because of the Hillary comments, I said, let me go out and make it, because I love you guys. You've been great. This was a mistake. We're happy to talk about how people are getting it wrong. Shut up, shut up, shut up.
That's astonishing that you're literally doing your job. And because it's going against the narrative, they're unhappy about that. When do you think that could that have happened 10 years earlier?
No, I don't think so.
Is this part of the sort of Trump derangement syndrome of the mainstream media?
Correct. That was the beginning of it. That's where my first exposure to the symptomatology.
Because had you done that for Trump, they would have no problem about it.
No,
They
I'd
would have
done it the
renewed your
night before.
contract. Oh,
I'd
right,
done
yeah,
it.
right,
The night
right.
before, I was like, hey, it could be narcissistic, hypomanic, whatever. You know, I see that. And they love that. By the way, I'd done that probably 3 or 4 times before on Don Lemon's show because they were so preoccupied. And the one thing I kept saying, like, okay, he's narcissistic, hypomanic, but if he were a malignant narcissist, his family wouldn't be around him so much. You know, malignant narcissists alienate everybody. So that to me was like, his family loves him. You can see it. There's something there. So
if we can take a small detour, do you think you'd be able to do that sort of an analysis now on Trump, Kamala, and Biden? Like a quick Dr. Drew analysis on the.
You're going to get me in
people.
trouble, motherfucker. so, okay, let's do it. So let's start with Biden. I saw the Parkinsonism early. I saw the cognitive decline early. You don't have to be taking care of a patient. If he broke out in a rash, I could see a picture of the rash and say that's a rash. Same thing with Parkinsonism. I can see it. Now, I don't know if that Parkinsonism is caused by Parkinson's disease, a medication, Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia.
And why are you saying it's Parkinsonism and not dementia?
Because I can see the Parkinsonism in his movements. That's just indisputable.
Sorry, I don't actually know what Parkinsonism is.
So it is motoric slowing, it is freezing, it's cogwheeling.
And it's different from Parkinson's disease.
One of the causes of Parkinsonism is Parkinson's disease. Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's like saying, I don't know, cough or something. But the mask-like faces, lack of expression, of hypophonia, the voice is sort of all the stuff you're hearing. And it is often, all of those causes of Parkinsonism, typically, other than the medication cause, are typically associated with cognitive decline.
Okay.
And so you look at him and you go, he's not responding the way he used to. He has, sure seems like he's not, lost a step.
Okay.
And so,
could that analysis be wrong? Could that not be the case?
It could not be the case. Hope I'm getting all my negatives right. That he doesn't have Parkinsonism. He has Parkinsonism, indisputable.
Okay. So they. I don't want. This is a whole other conversation, but I want to ask why the hell they're not invoking the 25th Amendment. But that would take us down a different alley.
Yeah, they sort of.
But they have the grounds.
They de facto did, didn't they? They sort of did. The only part they left out was putting the vice president in the presidency, which I would argue that would have been an honest move. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's a usurpation of democracy, right? But whatever. Far be it from me.
Yeah.
Kevin and Larry got on CNN and said that today. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So the Parkinsonism, the cognitive problems, the question is, do they meet some level where his judgment is impaired and his ability to process information is impaired, his memory is so impaired? You can say cognitive decline for sure. Is it age-related cognitive? I have age-related cognitive decline. I don't have the same. I miss some of the stuff I used to be able to do. I used to be able to hold 3 things in mind while I was holding a conversation like this. I cannot do that anymore. That's normal. Is that normal cognitive decline for him, or is it something we should be worried about? These are all issues that we need to struggle with as this population gets older and we put people in their late 70s into the White House. That is a really significant issue. But I would say yes, cognitive decline. Yes. Okay. If you made me make a bet, I'd say yeah, cognitive decline, Parkinsonism. Is it vascular disease? I don't know what's causing it because I don't take care of him.
But he can't not have it. So
he can't not have it. I think that's right. Or he can't not have it. He has it. Yeah, 2 negatives. Yeah.
So Kamala then.
Okay, Kamala, I can't figure out. My apologies to everybody.
I don't think there's any ailment. It's a personality.
Well, people keep coming to me. The thing that is put in front of me is why the really significant, what looks like personality changes. Sometimes it's a lot more loose and a lot more, even more word salad, believe it or not, and more nonsensical language, and more what would be called sort of emotional lability, giddiness, sort of. They're sort of seeing giddiness, and I see that. I see it. Is that because she had a glass of wine? Maybe. Does that mean that she's an alcoholic? No. She likes wine. She says she likes wine. Maybe we're just catching her after a glass of wine. Should I take issue with that? No. U.S. Grant was another one of my favorite presidents. George Bush was an alcoholic. There are lots of alcoholics in the White House, lots of. But is she practicing and exploding with alcoholism? No. I see no evidence of that. Yeah. Is there a cognitive or personality problem?
It's the thing that's hard to put together is how that she was the AG here, and yet
And senator here.
and senator, and yet she answers some of these questions, and you watch her, and they're really moronic answers. And so she's got a history which suggests that she's smart, but
Yes.
when you hear her speak, she's not.
And she had to take the bar twice. So it makes you go, but she did pass the bar. California bar is very hard to pass. A lot of good lawyers have taken it twice. And as AG, apparently there was some questionable whether she really was a good litigator, whether she did that stuff. Willie Brown, who was her boyfriend, says she's very smart. So, okay, I take his word for it. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah. Eric Weinstein's analysis, although I'm sure he'll say I'm misrepresenting it, but my interpretation of his analysis is that she has the impossible task of trying to not offend all the different factions that the Democrats need right now, from the progressive hard left to the center left. And so it's actually, she's hamstrung by saying things that might offend that.
You would think she could answer a question. You would think. If she's actually clever. I mean, they lay stuff up for her, the simplest stuff. Exactly. I mean, Anderson Cooper's just sort of laying it up. Like, you change your opinion. Why? Come up with something.
Yeah, exactly.
Just answer it.
Yeah.
But when you just engage in obfuscation, it looks like obfuscation, and it does not look very appealing or something like somebody you could trust.
So personality-wise, though...
And given now trust is a major issue in this country, I don't trust anything or anybody. Trust must be earned.
Trump?
Yes.
Psychopath?
No, I don't see any psychopathy.
What's your analysis?
He narcissist for sure. He's like so many businessmen. To me, he fits a business. I've known a million guys, primarily men, that are these sort of narcissistic, hypomanic, uni-focused people who get shit done. I've talked to him when he was being impeached the second time, and I went, "How do you handle this?" He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "I think there's something wrong with me. It just doesn't affect me." And I would say, yeah, that probably is a pathology. But maybe it's the kind of pathology you want in the White House. That's my point. We have to be very kind of circumspect about saying something's a pathology, and therefore we don't want it in the White House.
Yeah, or
it's really
the
hard.
Sort of thing you might need to have to endure the amount of attacks he's had.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when you are going to be dismantling or addressing what I was tilting at an hour ago, bureaucracy is the enemy.
Yeah.
The Jacobins invented this. And we don't understand that the Russians and then the Ceausescus, and they took it and turned them into dictatorships. But it's the Jacobins, it's Louis XIV that invented these bureaucratic states. And we want the same thing? No, we should not want that. We should not want that.
Let me bring us to what we've alluded to earlier.
No one except you knows what I was talking about, by the way, because Americans don't know the European history.
Well, I wanted to get there, and we're going to end up talking about Napoleon, which I'd be keen to do. But
I went so deep on that recently.
Oh, really? Let's do that one.
Quick aside.
Okay.
I speak French, and I cleared my long COVID by studying language, and so we have since learned. I was deeply foggy and fatigued and stuff, and I had this sense that if I worked on language or music or dance for some reason, that it would help. We have since learned that the injury from any serious viral illness or serious illness generally tends to center on the temporal lobe, which is the language center. Isn't that interesting? And so I learned Greek actually at the time, and it cleared. And I thought, I'm going to get my French together. I've spoken French forever. I still don't understand these people when they talk. Why is that? What's wrong with me? If you speak French, you'll understand why, because they speak like 4 different languages. They obscure things. They control. Oh my God! But anyway, so I listened to a lot of lectures in French by French historians, primarily on Napoleon. I think I was triggered by watching the film, and I thought this doesn't feel right to me.
I hated that film.
Yeah, me too. But it triggered me to really go deep. Yeah. It's way off target, way off.
Yeah.
Even the way they dance through Robespierre, and it's just ridiculous the way they did it. Frankly,
as an Englishman who has been brought up to hate Napoleon, I hated that film because they completely belittled him and didn't present him as the truly formidable, brilliant man he was.
Correct.
Who we defeated.
And thank you. Do you know one of the sort of propagandistic sort of elements in who he was. What's the first thing when you think about when you think of Napoleon? What's the first sort of body type image?
Oh yeah, they're saying he's short. He wasn't short.
He wasn't short. He was
absolutely
average.
short.
He was exactly average for Frenchmen at the time.
exactly.
At his death, they measured him. He was exactly average.
Yeah.
So, but the Russians and the Germans and the French and the British hated him. He's a little man.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so I noticed that the French historians were reopening the books on Napoleon. They were going, well, he wasn't all bad. And yes, he made some decisions, but let's look at why he made those decisions about Santo Domingo and the slave uprising there and what he did. And he was the royalist for funding it. And what was he supposed to do? He's really, So, and then I heard them start to say, we have to start thinking about our history and it's who we are. And I thought, oh, this is the immigration thing. I knew it immediately, and Marie Le Pen came up right on the heels of that, and I thought, oh, here it is. Yeah. They're trying to figure out what it means to be French and how to protect it, and that's a good thing. Yep. I like what they did. I like that history. They do need to protect it. I hope they get the balance right. They're in a shitstorm right now with that tripartite system they're in. Good for Michel, the new prime minister. Forget his name.
Well, that question about who we are is a question that's been had across Europe and all countries. And
you British, it may be too late. It may be too late for you guys.
Late. It's much easier to answer in this question because the founding fathers had the answer, which is e pluribus unum, which I think is key. But we're founded on that, right? We're founded on bringing everybody together. We just don't understand how to do it right. Yeah.
Still.
All right. Yeah. Look, let's do that another time.
Okay. All right.
I want to bring us back
HHS.
to, yes.
HHS.
So this is a big. Okay. I'm going to read what the New York Post reported, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
The GOP-led House report on HHS, that's the Department of Health and Human Services, spent $911,174,285 of taxpayer money on a massive COVID-19 vaccination promotion campaign that lied about masking, vaccines, and boosters, and consistently, this is quote, consistently overstated the risk of the virus to children, according to this House Committee report.
And committed themselves to the teachers' union. Jay Bhattacharya noticed there's something like that in there too, where they guaranteed the teachers' union they would protect them against the kids.
Okay. So what's the significance of that?
That's the reason the school stayed closed.
Okay. Now
that's the reason millions of children were harmed. That's the reason we have a mental health crisis in young adulthood. It's disgusting. It's so predictable. You asked me how I got out on alternative media. I haven't finished that story yet.
Yeah.
So during COVID, I got canceled for trying to calm people down. I saw the panic. I thought it was the press. I didn't realize the government was involved with it. And I was like, don't listen to these people. They just want your eyeballs. The word staggering and grim was uttered every third sentence before we ever had a case here. And I thought, oh, this is going to be terrible. The panic is going to kill people. I was like, the one thing I got wrong was I kept saying, just listen to the CDC, listen to Dr. Fauci. They'll get you through this. I said that at the end of every statement I made. Now, when people play back my statements, they leave that part out. That was actually the only thing I got wrong. So,
right.
So when I was canceled, my wife started encouraging me to sort of go out on stream, and I think we did Facebook Lives first, and just give my ideas, my opinions. Like people want to hear what you have to say.
Sorry, what did the cancellation look like exactly?
It was a massive. Somebody strung together a bunch of videos that made it look like I was saying essentially, "Don't worry about COVID, it's the flu."
So it was a character assassination.
Yes. Oh, deep, profound. And on the heels of that, so many pile-on New York Times hit piece, one thing after the other.
Mainstream media dog pile.
And by the way, the New York Times, Rob Schneider were both attacked in that New York Times article, and we both bring it out regularly and go over all the content because we were so right in everything that they were attacking us for.
Right. Okay.
So, in any event. This now puts a nail in that coffin. The HHS.
So this is vindication for you,
of course. And
so this is a big deal for you on a personal level.
Yes, it is. Well,
you didn't have it before. I mean, you sort
I
of
knew it. I've known this just from all the people I've interviewed who were inside during all that. I knew that 6 feet distancing was out of thin air. I knew that Dr. Redfield and Scott Atlas were sidelined for having an opinion based on data. We were not allowed to look at data and to be a scientist. I knew Birx was running the playbook of the opioid pandemic by running around and demanding lockdowns. That's how the opioid thing happened. Evangelist doctors got control of the state legislatures and the regulatory systems. That's how you perpetrate a pandemic from the medical system. And so I saw it all happening. I knew it was happening, but I never expected to be vindicated. In any event, she said, just get up there and just start telling your thing. And I back to the French, I said, I was doing that for every day for a while, just sort of answering questions because people were distressed. They didn't know what to trust. I said, let me answer your questions. I'll just answer as best I can. And after about a week of that, I said, I feel like I should be saying, les carottes sont cuites. Les carottes sont cuites. And I felt like the French underground sort of giving out information on the DL. It really felt like that because out of my kids' playroom, we were broadcasting to the world. No one knew it. And that evolved into a thing that my wife brilliantly kind of produced where we were addressing these issues in a way that people wanted to hear, and ended up interviewing every doctor that had been canceled, and I learned something profound from each and every one of them. So, and those people are all in this document. And Jay Bhattacharya, who does a devastating takedown based on this argument, whom they had tried to devastatingly take down, is where I suggest people look on X today to get the details of this thing.
Well, Jay Bhattacharya is still at Stanford, and there's others.
And this new president is sort of backing him on trying to bring scientists together to continue this conversation of how we got things wrong and what we need to do different next time.
There's a couple of details I want to pick up on, or maybe one specifically, is that this campaign that has been called out began in August 2020, i.e. under Trump.
Yes.
And continued until June 2023. So I want to understand not only what this report means, so you've already said what it means on a personal level, but what it means for America. Is this the beginning of a justice for the lies that happen, or a reckoning at least?
This is part of what feels like a waterfall of information that is coming to people's minds. What Lincoln used to call the public mind, I think, is shifting. And it has been deeply propagandized, deeply brainwashed on all fronts. It's not one side or the other. I'm concerned about some of the stuff on one side because it's so medically relevant. But the public mind is awakening. And this is part of it. The question is, will mainstream media do anything with this? If I were at CNN, I would categorically advise them to do so because they need to reestablish trust. Again, when I retweeted today Jay Bhattacharya's thread, one of the users said, "Whom shall I trust? Who shall I trust?" Yeah. Actually, in the American English, you can use either one. And I said, "No one." And so we need to rebuild that. And so media needs to rebuild it, medical system needs to rebuild it, public health needs to rebuild it. How we go about that is going to be the story going forward. Yeah. And we'll see. We'll see who's honest. We'll see who can reckon. We'll see who can take a responsibility for their excesses. I'm trying to take mine. I like apologizing. When I got that massive canceling, they came after my kids, and they were scared, and that's why I apologized. And I have no problem apologizing where I get things wrong. I have no problem with that. And I committed to sign up for service in New York City in particular, where they were collecting physicians to come in and work in the ICUs, which I'm good at. And I went all the way through the interview process and was ready to go, and then it just ended. They didn't need the doctors anymore. That only went on for a couple months that they needed the doctors. People don't realize that. It just ended fast. And when it ended pretty much completely. Anyway, what was I talking about? HHS. Yeah. So we'll see if this is just part of the public mind awakening and coming into a new reality and a new understanding of what they can and can't trust, and that the government has been manipulating them and has been. Look, and I consider almost more important than this. I don't know if you noticed that the BART employees in San Francisco successfully prosecuted the BART system for firing them for not taking the vaccine. That happened yesterday, I think. And these lawsuits, this country responds to monetary motivation. And when those lawsuits start, the thing that's really got to happen is somebody's got to figure out a way to go after the media for character assassination, and then guys like Aaron Kheriaty and that Clinton versus Missouri thing needs to keep going, and somebody who got injured from the vaccine because they needed it to go to school needs to sue those fucking institutions. Then they will reconsider their grandiose positions from on high. Not until that happens.
So I'd like to come back to Kennedy because
we've
mentioned him. We've mentioned the Kennedy family a few times.
Yes.
And
so RFK Jr. I got involved with because of this.
are you part of the Maha movement?
I'm adjacent.
You're adjacent.
I've tried not to put my bet anywhere just yet, but I've been supportive of it for sure. And it happened when Dr. Kelly Victory, somebody I was co-broadcasting with at the time, introduced me to RFK Jr. I got to interview him. He enlightened me, brought into my awareness the cozy relationships between the regulators and the farm. I didn't really believe it. I didn't really know it. And at the end of it, he said to me, he goes, Drew, he goes, you're so brave to talk to me. I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, you'll see. This requires courage. I thought, courage for a lawyer and a doctor to speak publicly?
Yeah.
Oh, things are more fucked up than I realized.
Yeah.
And he was right. I was attacked. I still am attacked by all kinds of disciplines for it. But that made me jump into his camp to support him, learn more about him, learn more about what he's advocating. And I have emceed and done all kinds of stuff for him to help with his campaign. I want him in Washington. I want that brain in Washington. He doesn't have to be president. I want him in Washington. That has been my position straight away.
And it seems that if Trump wins, he will be part of that transition team.
It makes me inclined to want to put Trump in there if he's going to bring. And I'm a Musk fan too. I'm sorry, I really am. I read his biography and I was like, oh my God, this guy's a national treasure.
Yeah.
There's only one of these.
Yeah, there's quite an amazing team, that transition team.
And Tulsi Gabbard's a friend. I had dinner with her, and she's a wonderful person. Who else? Oh, Vivek. I've interviewed him.
Yeah.
He's Vivek. Yes, he is an extraordinary guy, an extraordinary mind, and a wonderful rhetorician.
Yes.
I feel like he can help bring, again, I'm worried about the public mind. We got to get to a place where we're no longer brainwashed, where we're thinking for ourselves, where we're doing what Alexis de Tocqueville, sorry, this has been all about the French. You ever read Democracy in America?
Of course.
Again, no one else here has. Thank you for having done so, but I have too. And he said it is the local practice of democracy that is the genius of our system. And we need to get back to that and do it properly in our classrooms, in our counties, everywhere. The local practice needs to be restored. And we need to get that F away from the federal government. It was not the plan.
So this sounds actually, I'm trying to summarize exactly what the Maha, the Make America Healthy.
I would say fundamentally, I would say for me, let me talk about what it is for me. Fundamentally for me is raising awareness about where the systems are in place that are making us unhealthy, and to really look at those systems, whether it's cozy relationship between regulators and pharma companies, or food companies and their tobacco strategies, literally, and where that is affecting us badly, and how we can change that and raise awareness so the individual and the family can change it as well.
So this is elite corruption, essentially. This is
ensconced bureaucracy.
Ensconced bureaucracy.
That cannot change direction, and it is harming people, and it needs to be taken down. When bureaucracies become ossified like this, and non-elected officials think they're more important than elected officials, which I've heard specific cases of, that is disgusting, that needs to be taken down, that is not okay. I don't care who the bureaucracy is, they serve at the pleasure of the people we elect, and that's it. And when they start thinking they run the government, we got a big problem here. So, and then there's the awareness. And of course it's interesting. We've not really in the Maha movement talked about healthcare delivery, right? We're talking about wellness more than healthcare. Our healthcare system is a mess too.
That's right.
But I don't know, that is almost too big for them to do all of this. I'm glad they're putting that aside for the moment and sort of seeing how that develops in the intermediate term, and then we'll be able to maybe have some insurance reform. It's really what's needed.
What insurance reform do you think then is needed?
One thing, in my opinion, the doctor's opinion that the patient needs the care should be enough for the patient to get the care. Now the doctor's opinion doesn't mean shit. The doctor sitting across from the patients, maybe not total fiat authority, but it should be the predominant input. And if that doctor feels strongly enough, can advocate for that care, that's it. Everything changes when the doctor, my opinion, didn't mean shit for all of my patients. And if my patient left the hospital because they couldn't afford to stay there and the insurance wouldn't cover anymore and they killed themselves, the insurance company would say, well, we don't discharge patients. There's the Dr. Pinsky's name right there on the description. And if I made a complaint to the state because of the practices, then the insurance company responded to me by saying, oh, Dr. Pinsky, we see you don't like our business practices. I'll tell you what, we will decertify you and the entire hospital from our insurance system. And then the hospital would come down on me. Good times.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I want to continue in this conversation because it's a big one.
what do you think about Maha?
I spoke to Nicole Shanahan.
I have too.
In San Francisco.
Yep.
I was very impressed.
Yes, she's lovely.
There's aspects of it which she just put a video out yesterday, actually, a very moving one addressed to her father about her children taking vaccines. Now, this is a topic, astonishingly enough, my producer back in London said, you've got to be very careful because you put this on YouTube,
Vaccines.
they're going to demonetize it.
If you say, not just demonetize it, I can't get my stuff out on YouTube.
So you get a strike.
Yeah.
So it's
they'll just shut you down.
They'll shut you down. Yeah. So there's things.
Go on
let's
Rumble.
put it this way.
That's why
well,
I'm
on Rumble as well. It's my safety.
Ask Dr. Drew on Rumble. Please see you guys. I would love your people to be over there. Join us.
Well, so maybe this is the question you'll answer on Rumble.
Yeah.
Is Nicole Shanahan right about what she's saying about vaccines? It's astonishing to me that even in America you can't have that conversation on YouTube.
I know. On anything. You'll get canceled. You still get canceled for the vaccine conversation.
Yeah. But she is being very bold on X and she is saying stuff that's...
She's all the way in one direction. I am not there. I am not there. I am, but I would have been extremely critical of people like that 3 years ago. I was a vaccine enthusiast. I'm on the record having said there are not enough vaccines for my kids. Give me more. Now, I am categorically anti-mandate, and I'm very concerned about everywhere that they're mandated. I understand the public health implication of saying that, and we need to figure that piece out. And I've become aware, I was always told that vaccines were a lost leader for pharma companies. I always said they lose money on this. Why are you, they're not making money. Wrong. And the way they've gotten things through, just the Pfizer studies that got through the FDA was enough to convince me. If you look at Joseph Fryman's analysis of that study, you will see the deficiencies and how distorted what they actually documented was put into the public. Well, that was enough to convince me that we have really serious problems at the FDA and we need to look at that and make sure the right studies are done, period. Now, I may be vaccinating the hell out of my grandchildren. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm a scientist. I need the data. I need the proper data. And I have been hoodwinked and I am pissed. Yeah. I'm still believe that a lot of this stuff's going to be vindicated. But I have to prove that in order to be able to discuss risk-reward with the patient. And I still can't discuss risk-reward of COVID vaccines. What am I doing when I have a booster for JN1 when XEC is arriving here? Am I advocating for that booster? I don't know. Huh. And by the way, lots of side effects now we're starting to see and understand. If a patient really, really wants it, I don't stand in the way of it. But me recommending, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, on that note,
yes, sir.
Dr. Drew, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely fascinating. Privilege was totally mine. Where can listeners and viewers find you? It's your Rumble channel.
Rumble, drdrew.com is where everything is, but please go to Ask Dr. Drew at Rumble. That's where we seem to be getting the greatest reach. That's where your interview with me is, following the what's the name of the organization? In Oxford?
Nancy Pelosi, Oxford Union.
Oxford Union.
Yeah.
The Oxford Union, which I just still, it's a classic. It will be, I swear to God, it will be something that people will note in the history of how things changed and how people woke up and became rational and started thinking like smart human beings again, that we all are. This country is full of smart people. And by the way, the other thing is we're a little nutty over here. People did not come to this country because things were going well. You know what I mean? They came together. The people that were escaping was one thing, but there were also people that were like,
and they came to this country because they love freedom.
They love freedom. That is now my line in the stand, which is the freedom to speak. That the fact that is under attack or even questioned is disgusting and alarming and shocking to me. And so that is where I'm putting my energy. I will defend anybody's right to say anything. My right to attack it too, but that is a line in the sand we must hold.
And your colleague, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, even said that censorship kills.
100%. We have now ample evidence of that.
Yeah.
And so does mandating from on high anything related to healthcare without risk-reward analysis. And the primary source for that risk-reward for you as an individual is your healthcare provider, not the fucking government.
Dr. Drew, thank you so much. A pleasure. I'm sure our audience will have found that fascinating.
Cheers.
Thank you for watching the Winston Marshall Show. That was Dr. Drew. If you enjoyed that, if you want to hear more great guests like Dr. Drew discussing the issues that you want to hear about and that the mainstream media are not covering, remember, all you have to do is press subscribe. But for now, be well.